Last stand, and I came to deliver. Been called a Clinton operative, a Russian, and a grifter. By libs, a Washington student debt, proud to be an intern, sucking up to pigs who get a tax cut in the midterms. You cut the ties but never heal the wrist burns. Capitalist shackles wrap and penetrate like ringworms around the necks of those whose deaths will not affect the king's purse or the coffers of the company the king serves, who manufacture mandated tinctures. Their safety data hanging from a fixture, half a mile skyward, just dangling from the rafters. My grift is sobbing till I'm cackling with laughter. I guess I would've made a decent actor. I'd be great at crying on command until they cut plus 40 minutes after. When the director waves a hand, it ain't a rap, it's now a legal matter. Honey, my grift is weeping on a mic until I'm hacking up airstrike verses like it's bombs away and batter up. Swinging on these bigots, they keep killing us to fatten up. Kill the switch, eat the rich, I think they're finally fat enough. Grab your knife and fork, the world is yours, just say you've had enough. And if you're comfy, you could go ahead and laugh it up. Tell me how the most important vote I'll ever cast is like the choosing of a bus, in that it might not take you anywhere you want, but no one can deny the fact the bus is now no longer where it was. And that's the kind of progress we should celebrate and trust. Spoken like a kid who never took a bus. Spoken like a piece of shit that used some cash to mask his stink and truly thinks he's one of us. Spoken like a terminally unserious person who equates our cries for rights to mixed up orders from a server. It paints a privileged picture of what you would label urgent if the worst thing you've experienced in life has been the time your waiter accidentally brought a tray of gold flake scallop when you clearly ordered gold flake urgent. And now you're storming out the restaurant and hopping in a Tesla. You got 80 pounds of Tony Fauci merchant.
Rewind to chains won't make you wait in such a long line. Life's not just a way to waste your free time. Air that's fit to breathe is not a free ride. Free ride. Rewind to a chance won't make you wait in such a long line. Life's not just a way to waste your free time. Air that's fit to breathe is not a free ride. Free ride.
Best to place your bets on weaponizing the identity of every limp progressive claiming grassroots integrity. Policy is a slippery slope for all of its complexity, so flex your brave resistance with this Ilhan Omar NFT. Numbered one of 723. Each depicts her valiantly championing a bill before she lays it at a donor's feet. And she can throw her hands up in the air with AOC and say if only Nina Turner could have voted present too, that's why we need another seat. We need some more progressives we elect to only tweet, who live to serve Humana and their label of elective slapped on every patient's gravest needs. And every station plays the theme that medical professionals agree on the effectiveness and safety of injections authorized for this emergency. And in purely unrelated news, the profits of the ones who manufacture vaccines just increased by nearly 36 billion with a fucking B. Sometimes it feels like we're the only ones that see. Sometimes it feels like all of us are lost at sea. And every time we think we see an island on the tip of the horizon, it turns out to be another measure making sure we're kept within the watchful eye of murderous authority. And so I guess my grift is crying for the future they denied us, where the people who would buy us are a mockable minority. And we are more than genomes under warranty. And we are more than serfs in constant quarantine. If I had a single breath left, I'd let the chorus scream. I'd announce our leaders claiming none for all and more for me. None for all and more for me. None for all and more for me. None for all and more for me.
Rewind to a chance won't make you wait in such a long line. Life's not just a way to waste your free time. Air that's fit to breathe is not a free ride. Free ride. Rewind to a chance won't make you wait in such a long line. Life's not just a way to waste your free time. Air that's fit to breathe is not a free ride. Free ride.
Have just an off-the-cuff chat between you and me. Us. We want to talk right down to earth in a language that everybody here can easily understand.
Who are these people?
It's us. We're these people.
I love that intro. I love that intro so much.
I'm here with a different co-host this time, Oz LaFave.
Hey guys, thanks so much for having me on.
Friend of the show, DJ Joe Nice. How are you, friend?
What's good? And you hear Nick say this all the time. The United States is the most propagandized country in the world.
We are so fucked, you guys. Again, I'm sorry for being cynical, but seriously,
No.
we're fucked. We are
Right.
fucked. We are well and truly fucking fucked.
Just appreciate all the work that you do and the platforms that you all are providing.
Hey, you. Doing good. How are you guys doing?
And as independent media, we have a responsibility to be, we don't hide our bias, obviously, but we must stay true to the facts.
What's up, Pam?
Cheers and salutations. Smoke them if you got them.
But I am here with a man that I've been waiting to talk to for the last couple of years, Nico House.
As an educator, what I would suggest is that, first of all, podcasts like these are made.
So you need to be an example for the people and for the future, knowing that your words can actually change the future.
What do you feel? What would Kwame Ture feel we would have to do?
Well, politics is every day of every minute. You have to be aware of what's going on. Not voting on one day, so the vote has never meant anything. So I'm not a Democrat.
See, I would call that guy the Black Obama.
No. The issues that we talk about, listen to us.
As always, kids, labels are bad. Stay independent. Good night, fam.
INN News.
It is Wednesday, my dudes.
It's Wednesday. It's another Wednesday. We did it. We're here. It's me, Reef, with my co-host as always, Collin Radix-Carter. Kipper, how are you? A lot of things happened in the last day. So,
do you mind switching your screen so I could see your handsome face? At least, thank you.
Is that better?
Yes.
I look like Grizzly Adams, but at least a handsome Grizzly Adams is the look I'm going for. But I need a haircut. I know. Stop.
I've told you need a haircut.
Yeah, it's just I don't like going.
What?
I don't like going. Like then I gotta go do stuff. I don't know. It's just my brain, And then once it's done, it's done, and it's fine.
Yeah, it makes you. It's. I would argue for men the cheapest. Thing you could do to improve, among the cheapest, relatively, that you can do to feel better about yourself. I always feel better. Granted, I'm bald.
I definitely got to trim.
Granted, I'm bald. But I still get haircuts just to kind of clean up the back that I can't necessarily, and my neck that I can't necessarily get with my razor, and to line this up. So I get that done like at least about once a month now, or maybe a few weeks or so. So
DC still freezing, or did it warm back up yet?
No, it's cold.
Oh.
Which is driving my kids nuts because I wasn't able to take them outside today because it was so cold, and they acted accordingly.
Right.
So I was yelling at them in love today. because they were just being ridiculous. So I was like, this is going to be a long winter and a long time until you get my next holiday break. So,
well,
but yeah,
stories.
Yeah, we're doing the thing that I don't like doing, talking about all Israel, but given breaking / developing news regarding the ceasefire, that's obviously, as of today, that's obviously going to be the biggest and probably the trending story of the week. So we are going to cover it. I am going to say off the bat, and I'll say this again when we get to the segment later on the show tonight. A lot of the information, well, part of it, here's reality. There's only so much hours in the day that I get to actually do this.
Yeah.
Because I actually have a job. Not knocking anyone who does this for a living. Shout out to you. I have a job and I usually have things to do after my job. And I don't have a lot of time to commit to prepping stories and doing thumbnails and getting all of this done.
We're pretty good with
week.
it. We're doing it Monday or Tuesday, which we did again.
Right.
And it's
but
like,
especially
Tuesday, there's a bunch of crap Wednesday. So we definitely try to throw in as much updated information. So,
which may be hard to do because, again, I have a job and I don't have that much time to update information as I would like to, or cut it down to a point where it's more of a manageable segment length, especially for you guys who might watch this via clips after we do this live stream. That being said, just after seeing some of the responses regarding the ceasefire today, I will be very honest to say that I'm a little disappointed in some of the reactions that even our colleagues in the space had towards this, especially those who've been talking about Gaza for the last year and change.
Yeah.
Some of the takes, while I understand it, I don't think are necessarily the correct takes that we should have at this point. So I'm asking those of you who are watching for some grace in terms of some of the information that we have for this later story might be a little inaccurate, possibly. As I said, there was a lot going, even up until we just went live. We were still pulling stuff up until like the last few minutes.
Yeah.
So some of the stuff might be inaccurate. Some of the stuff might not be the best information that we get. Hopefully we'll all kind of pull together cohesively. But I definitely have an opinion. Reef definitely has an opinion. We want to share our opinions with you guys, and I'm sure you guys also have opinions too. So, but we want to do the story with the guys. It's a developing story. So obviously, there's probably going to be a lot more that will be said in terms of the ceasefire as we head into the Trump administration and how this develops. So we'll definitely keep you abreast of that. But we also kind of want to share our take and I think the reality of the situation that I think more people should have, especially if you're an avid watcher of independent media. So that aside, we will talk about the ceasefire deal later. But what we're going to talk about first, shout out to Reef for pulling this story for me. This essentially is, so last week I talked about the city developments that are in place in most states throughout the country, whether from planning to actually fruition. So if you did not watch that stream or that clip, please go to our YouTube page to watch it. I think it will be a good reminder of the reality of our police state and what Trump will be inheriting next week. Keep that in mind. this will serve as this story for all intents and purposes serves as a part 2. So this kind of serves more as goes into more depth in terms of our police state and their connection with Israel, and how a lot of the tools that our police implement are based off of practices that are done in Israel. I know plenty of people in our space, especially those of color, have talked about this, maybe on their shows. Again, we're going to give you this as a reminder. And for those of you who may not know, provide you with that information in terms of how interconnected our police state is with the IDF.
Yeah.
And then what did you bring?
Well, I brought an unfortunate story about how Israel took out their Hamas rape stuff from the UN in fear of like it coming back on them and their rape allegations. So we're going to tune in for that. So warning for that if you are sensitive to talks about that sort of thing. Which I'll warn you again when that segment comes up. So there's going to be some testimonies, so that might be a little triggering for people, but we'll get through it if you're there for that. You know, good on you. But I also brought a bit about now that this ceasefire deal is going through. This segment
allegedly
will do well. Allegedly, yes. So this is Abbas, right? Palestinian Authority president, right? And we're going to talk about Palestinian Authority not being so great, you know, and possibly eating their own. There's been some stuff about that for a while. We're going to bring the Electric Intifada and you know, and what they had to say about it. So that's what I brought. But yeah, going to be interesting. So yeah. Anyway, talking about these kind of stories is why we're demonetized. So you can always go to co-fi.com/indienewsnetwork, scan that QR code on your screen, or if you're in this live chat, you can press !donate. Get links to leave us little super chats like you used to be able to, but YouTube doesn't like us anymore. So you're welcome to do that. You know, some of you already are lovely supporters here on our Wall of Fame. You know, you've used things like CashApp, Ko-fi, PayPal, Substack, all that fun stuff to hook us up. We appreciate that, but look at all of you. We don't have much more room. We're gonna have to figure out what to do when we run out of room. So, you know, if you want us to do some work and make some more graphics, you're welcome to add your name to the list if you haven't already. But anyway, ready for our first story?
Yes. Cool. So this first story, and I'm sure if you are an avid watcher of independent media, you would probably, especially if you watch independent commentators of color, you probably might know that a lot of our police state and a lot of their practices are based on what is being done in Israel. So last week I I reported on the expansion of Cop City in pretty much every state throughout the country, whether in some type of planning or some type of phase of being implemented. So again, if you did not watch that live stream or segment, you can go to our playlist and check it out. I'll strongly suggest that you watch that to give you some context to this. But this segment will kind of serve as a part 2 to that article that I read last week, which we reported on. So this article was based in ScheerPost, written by Victoria Valenzuela, and where she writes, "Deadly exchange. U.S. sends hundreds of law enforcement to Israel to learn worst practices from the IDF." So Victoria continues, and you'll have to scan because too bad we don't have reader mode anymore
Yeah.
Actually, I have to come a little closer for this. It is not no, that's not gonna work.
Okay.
Zoom out. I'll do my best. Good thing I'm wearing my glasses.
Right.
It is not uncommon. Actually, I'll just read it from
the
my
article.
screen. That's probably not any better, but yeah, whatever. I'll get through it.
Okay.
It is not uncommon for police to drive around with their lights flashing in Black and working class neighborhoods in Atlanta. This is a tactic used to intimidate and make their presence known. For residents of these neighborhoods, it can feel like psychological warfare. U.S. law enforcement learned this strategy from Israeli forces. Thousands of law enforcement officials have traveled to Israel to learn new repression strategies and surveillance techniques from the Israel National Police, Israel Defense Forces, and the Shin Bet, who inflict violence, crowd control, and surveillance onto Palestinians. Anti-imperialist advocates say the tactics being taught in the U.S. law enforcement were battle-tested on Palestinians and spread to the U.S. to target Black and Brown communities for a training relationship that grants Israeli forces more power and profit, causing further harm to Palestinians. These programs are facilitated by the Anti-Defamation League, the Jewish Institute for National Security of America, and the Georgia International Law Enforcement Exchange Program, the latter of which started in 1996. U.S. leaders sought Israel's guidance to curb terrorism, and a deadly exchange of worst practices between the U.S. and Israeli forces was born. Federal, state, county, and mutual law enforcement executives, including local police departments, the FBI, and ICE, have traveled to Israel, while thousands of officials have attended conferences with Israeli experts in the U.S. An inaugural U.S.-Israeli security conference by JINSA occurred last month, where a former IDF commander was included as a guest speaker.
Yeah,
certain police practices. Yes.
Let's do that. There we go. Cool.
I was actually able to read it fine the way you had it.
Guest speaker. This be right here, right?
Yeah. Further down.
Yep.
More
down.
Yeah.
More down.
Yeah, I was fine reading it as it was before.
Okay. Well, it's
but
it's a little
this
easier to read.
Yeah. So behind the scenes, I think this is just a way for you to see us and the article too.
Exactly.
That's why Reef is doing.
Yep.
Anyway, certain police practices and policies that all happen time and time again, when you look back and try to pull back on the thread to see where they got this from, it always comes back to someone went to Israel. Steve H., an organizer with the Black Alliance for Peace. Within these programs, worst practices are shared to promote and extend discriminatory and repressive policing practices that already exist in both countries, said Reina Salem, an organizer with the U.S. Palestinian Community Network. U.S. forces take whatever is working in Israel and they bring it here and inflict it on Black and Brown people. Police departments in New York, L.A., New Orleans, and Atlanta, among others, have close ties with Israeli forces. Salam said that the increasing militarization of U.S. police in recent decades is due in large part to the funding and support of Israel's brutal military occupation. She says that in return for these trainings, the state of Israel gets in good standing with the U.S. for future support, and its forces learn new tactics in return. Salam said that Israeli learned stop and frisk and racist traffic stop techniques from U.S. law enforcement.
Oh, good to know it goes both ways.
Yeah. At the detriment of melanated
everyone.
People, but
yeah.
There is strong opposition. Palestinian solidarity, racial justice, and local organizations are calling for an end to this deadly exchange, saying that it perpetuates settler colonialism and violence against marginalized communities and harms both people in the U.S. and in Palestine. They say that investments should be made into the community, not policing. It essentially brings together people, all these violent systems that oppress our people here in the United States and oppress Palestinians and Palestine together, Salem said. Our communities need to come together to organize against these police exchange programs. Any thoughts so far? Although I'm sure.
No, yeah, it sounds familiar and what we've talked about frequently, you know?
Yeah.
So,
After George Floyd was murdered by the Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin in 2020, advocates say that the knee-to-neck chokehold was used and perfected to torture Palestinians by Israeli occupation forces through 72 years of ethnic cleansing and dispossession. Members of the Minneapolis Police Department have been trained by Israeli officials. Following that, when thousands of protesters took to the streets in the Black Lives Matter uprisings, police used racial profiling, tear gas, and other repressive crowd control techniques, which I was witness to and I wouldn't say sustained injuries, but saw it and was inflicted on me, at least the tear gas and all that, to quell the protesters. Salam said many of those practices were exported from the violence of Israeli forces. When police started using different kinds of weaponry against protesters, Palestinians were already very, very familiar with that kind of confrontation, Salam said. Between 2002 to 2009, the LAPD chief and deputy chief traveled to Israel for training multiple times. The deputy chief traveled as part of JINSA's first cohort in their first law enforcement engagement program. During these trips, Israeli companies, including the LAPD officials, to facial recognition and drone technology manufactured in Israel. The police department also developed a broken windows approach, which grows from the idea that constant policing of low-level disorder through the targeting of Black and Brown communities with constant police surveillance harassment will somehow deter serious criminal activity.
Which we know how that works.
After nearly 10 years of training with Israeli forces, the New York Police Department was exposed to have a run of demographics unit that spied on Muslims and treated basic acts of daily living as potential crimes, which are techniques used by Israeli forces on Palestinians. In return, they adopted NYPD's data collection method. Certain police practices and policies that happen time and time again, when you look back and try to pull back on the thread to see where they got this from, it always comes back to somebody who went to Israel, said Stephen H., an organizer with Black Alliance for Peace. Officials in Atlanta, Georgia, are pioneers in the police exchange department program as well.
Yeah.
The Georgia International Law Enforcement Exchange Program, housed at the University of Georgia, has been sending people to Israel every year for over 31 years. Stephen H. said that the trips are funded by private entities, the Department of Justice grants, and taxpayer dollars.
Oh,
Stephen H. also said that, yeah?
No, I was just taxpayer dollars. Of course that's going to send them over there.
Yeah.
You know?
But notice who is funding it.
Right.
So private equity, so corporations.
Probably places that also do the Cop City stuff, I'm betting.
Right. Which again, like if you want to boycott those organizations, go to that stream or that clip.
Yeah.
There was a whole list there of organizations,
the Glee
corporations.
Program. not the other Glee program. This Glee program. Ugh.
Stephen H. also said that the Glee program also trains with Israeli forces through annual conferences in Atlanta and hosts law enforcement from around the country at these events. The training, he said, includes workshops and seminars. Musa Springer, also an organizer with Black Alliance for Peace, said that at least 43,000 people have participated in Glee workshops, conferences, and events. They said it creates danger for Atlanteans, as demonstrated in the police killings of Anthony Hill and several Black people in Atlanta.
Yep.
There's a sort of level of racial profiling that is sewn into the tactics, and then those racial profiling, which also takes place here in the US among us, becomes even stronger and more reinforced in the style of policing, Springer said. What we see is that Black residents, as well as activists and organizers who are mobilizing, are increasingly treated as terrorists. Out of Atlanta's collaboration with Israeli forces comes their Cop City police training facility, which is based off Israel's Little Gaza, a replica of the Gaza Strip.
I did not know this.
I did not know this either. At these facilities, police can battle test repressive techniques and surveillance. Stephen H. said that the Cop City and Little Gaza are meant to give the occupying forces a realistic training ground in which they can actually implement their counterinsurgency tactics on the occupied population. Anyone who goes there will be participating in the skills development of counterinsurgency, of how to better practice kettling, how to better practice shutting down or brutalizing peaceful protests, Stephen H. said.
Yep.
This is why, as I said last week, and I'll say it again, this is what Trump is inheriting, folks. And you're going to be more willing to protest now with an either beefier and more powerful police state now. Thanks, Biden. Thank you to our government for essentially giving police the weapons, if they want to kill you. Because that will be state-sanctioned violence, which is okay for the corporations and our government, being that this is meant to protect them and not you. Anyway, in addition to repressive tactics, advocates say that U.S. and Israeli forces both make use of surveillance techniques and technology that is Israel-based, like Celebrate, and predictive police software, like the software produced by Palantir.
Yep.
Lou Bloomberg, co-founder of Eye on Surveillance and a representative of the Jewish Voice for Peace chapter in New Orleans, said that in 2014, the Baton Rouge PD took a trip to Tel Aviv, which is funded by a government grant, the Jewish Federation, and other private entities. The goal was to learn about Celebrate, a universal forensics extraction device from an Israeli-based technology company, in order to bring the surveillance back to the U.S. Celebrite's technology was tested on Palestinians before its usage became widespread. Because Israel is occupying the Palestinian people, it creates what author Anthony Lorstein calls the Palestinian Laboratory for Israel to experiment and then get all this data about these surveillance tools and then to be able to sell that. Look how well these tools are working to criminalize these people. Don't you want that for your country? Bloomberg said. An organizer with New Orleans Stop Helping Police Israel's Ports, an organization dedicated to ending all ties between New Orleans institutions and businesses and Israel, who wish to remain anonymous, said that a lot of cameras the city of New Orleans has put up in the streets for surveillance uses Israeli technology. She said that law enforcement can often use BriefCam, an Israeli video surveillance technology now owned by the parent company Canon.
Oh.
As in
the
camera
company. Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Oh.
Hundreds of people in the U.S. have been arrested due to facial recognition technology, some of them falsely identified. People of color, particularly Black people, are more likely to be misidentified by facial recognition technology.
Of course
the organizers said that
they fit the profile, Colin.
Well, yeah. Saying that from someone who's gone through that personally.
Yeah.
Anyway, the organizers said that Israeli technology companies are taking this technology and exploiting it for governments like the U.S. government to perpetuate this form of apartheid that marginalized communities have been living under. And Israel uses the same tactics abroad and over here in order to further their hegemony and their occupation of the people. Celebrate is used today to violate people's rights to due process, or these AI facial recognition technologies are used to attack and jail people, mostly disproportionately people of marginalized communities, the organizer told
Real News Network.
Network. These have been tried and tested methods in Palestine for the past decades, and Israel does it to expand its territory, to further occupy and oppress people, to further the apartheid system that they are under. So, not to make, I'll make this connection later, But the idea that a ceasefire is happening in the guise that people think, oh, it's over now, is complete bullshit for this alone. Like, I'm not going to give this up, and especially given with Trump being president, as I said, because, as I said, you all going to be looking to protest. You all going to be like wanting to stir the pot whenever Biden does some shit. And all the tech that, Trump is going to use has been gifted by Biden, who is funding the police state more. And don't think just because of all of this, and again, this is kind of the issue, is that they need this in order to protect themselves. So if you know of this, and if you're talking about a ceasefire, as a good thing, like, wouldn't this essentially kind of be resolved as well? I mean, that's just in my mind. Like, but we know that, again, and I don't want to say anymore because I really want to get into this later in the segment that I'm going to do after you.
Yeah.
But I think the connection needs to be made in the sense that truly, if there was something positive, then at minimum, a lot of this stuff that we're seeing with regards to Cop City, as far as the exchange of police, the exchange of tech, should also be resolved in terms of our policing as well. But that's not going to be happening anytime soon. If anything, that's going to be riled up a lot more. So to think that this ceasefire is actually doing something is really bad analysis. Yeah, I don't know. So it's just disappointing that people are not necessarily making that connection. But then again, I don't think that many folks are reporting on this in the way that we are, like, that we're able to make this connection.
Yeah. I mean, it's just
anyway.
like I hadn't heard about that little Gaza thing. That is something I was not aware of.
That should probably be something we should worth looking at, because up until when you sent me this, I had no idea about this either. So
we have talked about facial recognition before when in regards to Palestinians. So I think I called it like facial exploitation or something like that. So feel free to go take a look at that one. There's a lot more than just scanning your face. So, look out for that. But anyway, back to the article of Pam.
In addition to supplying local law enforcement with surveillance, the organizers said that Israeli companies sell Celebrate universal forensics extraction hacking software and training to ICE, which gives them access to personal data. ICE officials have gone on multiple trips to Israel to swap best practices at checkpoints, prisons, settlements, and airports in Israel. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security has also been contracting with Israeli defense electronics company Elbit Systems, which we've talked about before.
Yes, we have.
For technology that surveils the U.S.-Mexico border in southern Arizona since 2014. The contract was extended by Department of Homeland Security in 2017 to further militarize the border using this technology.
And
Edith Romero, an organizer,
Trump's going to be on that business right there. Good luck.
Right. Edith Romero, an organization with Iron Surveillance, said she sees parallels in the rhetoric Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Israeli forces use for Palestinians and the language used in the U.S. to talk about immigrants. In the past, President-elect Donald Trump and Netanyahu have praised each other's border policies. Scroll down.
Yep.
They're using this to target immigrant communities and to arrest, to detain, and to separate families, and sometimes deportations, Romero said. Activists are fighting for liberation in U.S. and Palestine. Some are already seeing victories. In 2020, Iron Surveillance successfully advocated for a ban on facial recognition surveillance, providing in large part by Israeli companies in New Orleans. While parts of the ban were reversed in 2022, the organization continues to hold monthly meetings to push back against surveillance and policing. So that kind of brings up a point that I've said before, especially if you're an organizer / activist. If you get a win, you don't give yourself a pat on the back and say we're done.
Working.
You keep working at it and to try and get a little bit more closer to the justice that you're seeing. Because the moment that you start slipping, the moment those things will possibly be put back in, and a lot worse than you were trying to advocate against. So it's good to see at least this group seemingly is continuing to push, even though they're getting wins. Additionally, they're looking to end economic ties between Israel and the city permanently and calling for the money to be redirected into the community. Renard Bridgewater, co-founder of Eye of Surveillance, said that so many things could be funded with the money that is going towards Israel and their continued onslaught and overall abuse and slaughter of Palestinian people. Bridgewater said that rather than funding law enforcement trips to Israel, cities should be supporting their residents by providing equitable living wages, education, affordable housing, and resources to solve food insecurity.
California, are you listening?
Right. Eye on Surveillance is also part of the Break the Bonds campaign in Louisiana, which aims to encourage state officials to divest from Israel. The state has over $40 million in bonds, which the organization said bolsters and supports Israel's economy. Bridgewater said that people can fight against police training exchanges and Israeli technology being used in the U.S. by organizing. Eye on Surveillance, Black Alliance for Peace, and U.S. Palestinian Community Network are some of the many organizations raising awareness about the issue. I think that small movements or small ripples certainly create larger movements and things of that nature, Bridgewater said. I think that anytime you have the opportunity to be able to build with folks, no matter if it's 2 or 3, that can eventually lead to 2 or 3,000, but it has to start somewhere, and it can't necessarily always be this very grandiose and very large, expensive ideas. It is important to get together and organize because as soon as we realize that our enemies are the same, the easier it is to realize who our allies are, said the organizer with no ship. Once we organize and put these 2 and 2 together, then we know who to put our effort against. So
I would also argue that like organizing for the small issues, right? Like specificity on that, I find like much more doable and important than like big overall ideas, because that's easier to co-opt, right? It's harder to co-opt when someone wants this specific thing, you know?
Right. But it's the same thing. And I think I've made this connection before. It's like if you're trying to lose weight, which actually both of us are, like you don't start with your goal weight. Like you start with a manageable weight and hit that. And then once you hit that, what's the next thing? And then the next thing, and then the next thing. So like those little victories that you get will lead to bigger things in time. So, but it's the idea of like, what is the end goal and what are the steps that you need to do in the middle in order to get there? So, but I think we often think not to say you shouldn't, but you often think from point A to point B, but make no plan as to how you're going to get the B from point A. And so that's where people get tripped up or get frustrated and overwhelmed and they quit. So, but it's still the idea, as I said before, once you get those little victories, you keep at it. You don't stop until, so it's like the idea of Medicare for All, for example. Like, I know a lot of people in this space for a time were pushing for, national healthcare for all as the thing. Well, a lot of people were saying, maybe figure it out maybe on state level. I personally kind of think that makes a lot more sense because it's a lot more manageable to do it that way, but with the intent of hopefully building that out over the course of several states. I mean, weed, that's kind of essentially any progressive policy has been implemented fully. Usually it takes way too long, but it's often started on state level. And building out from there. So all of that said, though, the parallels that Victoria made between Palestinians and Black people, again, is also why I say those Black people who think that Israel has nothing to do with you, when you get beat up by the cops within the next 4 years, you can have Israel to thank for it. Because a lot of these cops have been trained by these forces, and they're bringing the technology to surveil you, to target you, and to possibly kill you if given a chance. And I like how she kind of made it like, in the same way that you can view what's happening in Gaza as apartheid, we're kind of in a apartheid in of ourselves here, even though like people make the argument like Jim Crow, it still was kind of our equivalent of apartheid. A lot of the system still exists in this country. It hasn't completely gone away. So we're still under that same suppression, especially given the corporate class, especially if you're a person of color, to keep you under control. Which is why I don't get the bullshit of like, Black people who are kind of like, I'm American and like blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, the same country that is oppressing you at every turn, like that's the God you're chasing. Okay. Go off, whatever.
I love how I threw in an MJ line that you went right past.
What?
We were like, don't stop. But I was like, till you get enough.
Oh.
You just kept moving. Don't stop till you get enough. Come on. What? Anyway. But yeah, no, I felt like this was a good part 2 to your, Cop City stuff last time. So sent it over. Definitely was worth a read. So links as always in the description if you want to go hook up the old ScheerPost with some clicks. I'm sure they appreciate it. But talking about these things is why we're demonetized. So go to co-fi.com/indienewsnetwork, scan that QR code on your screen. Or as always, links are in the doobly-doo if you want to find them there. But we get it. It's times are tough. Money is tight. Just like and subscribe. Hit the share button. Let us know what you think. Is any of this a problem in your area? I'm sure it is, but let us know. Otherwise, thanks for watching. As people are shuffling into the chat, we got Max Sarge, we got Orca, Cynics here. People are shuffling into the clubhouse. So if you're over there on Rumble, make sure we know you're not a lizard person by using those opposable thumbs. Get in that chat. But anyway, yep. I definitely don't think people heard about that little Gaza thing. We'll have to look into that.
No. I'm actually, it might be something if we're able to find information on it, or if we know somebody who knows about it to kind of do a segment on that. I had no idea either, but it makes sense.
Yeah.
Like the idea that our cop cities are kind of based on the actual structure, actually training facilities that they have in Israel.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense to me. So
we got Orca, we got Driving Me Macy, CVC Voter said Happy Wednesday. So, we're doing it up. All right. I'm just going to get to our next one because we're going to have a long segment after that. But warning, if you're, sensitive to sexual assault testimonies and things like that, this might be a tougher read for you. But I think it's doable for most people. It's just, unfortunately, this is the reality that's happening in the area. But this is from Robert in Lakesh. Gotta get that right. This is over in Mint Press, which I'm just going to use the full word. I know that word frustrates people, so that's why I gave the warning. But systemic rape allegations against Israel meet a deafening silence. So, as expected. But this is January 2nd, so, things have happened since then. We'll get to it. But he writes, a flood of devastating new testimonies documenting the systemic sexual abuse of Palestinian men and women by Israeli soldiers has surfaced in recent weeks. Yet, As these harrowing accounts gain traction amongst human rights groups and international organizations, Western media has conspicuously turned its focus elsewhere, amplifying Israel's poorly corroborated claims against Hamas. Following a raid on Kamal Adwan Hospital in the northern Gaza Strip on December 28, Euromed Human Rights Monitor published a report documenting harrowing testimonies of sexual abuse by Israeli soldiers. Eyewitnesses' accounts describe how female medical workers and patients were rounded up at gunpoint, coerced into removing their headscarves, and forced to strip naked. Witnesses also reported that these women were subjected to degrading verbal abuse throughout the ordeal. A soldier forced a nurse to take off her trousers, then placed his hand on her. When she tried to resist, he struck her hard across the face, causing her nose to bleed. A female survivor of the Kamal Adwan Hospital raid recounted to a Euromed Monitor team. Eyewitness testimonies further detailed male soldiers engaging in groping, beating, and forcibly sexualizing women, as well as ripping clothes from women's chests when they refused to strip. These harrowing testimonies align with a documented pattern of abuse. In February 2024, Euromed Monitor reported similar accounts from female detainees in Gaza. Among them, a 45-year-old woman identified as NH recounted how she was threatened with rape and told that I would not see my children if I disobeyed the soldiers' orders. In February 2024, United Nations officials formally acknowledged the growing body of evidence pointing to sexual violence against Palestinian women in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. They confirmed that at least 2 cases of rape have been documented, marking a critical official recognition of the abuse. On June 12th, the United Nations released a human rights report that detailed systemic sexual and gender-based violence perpetuated by Israeli soldiers against Palestinians since October 7th. The report concluded that Palestinians have been subjected to a range of abuses, including forced public nudity, forced public stripping, sexualized torture and abuse, and sexual humiliation and harassment, both online and in person. And if you think that sounds familiar to Abu Ghraib, guess where they learned it from. So, par for the course. But in March, Canadian physicians who had worked in Gaza came forward with harrowing evidence. These are Canadian physicians, okay? Evidence of rape against Palestinian women, urging an investigation into the atrocity. So this isn't like the Palestinian women. I mean, some of them are, for sure, speaking up. But this is like other physicians in the area are like, hey, this is happening. So one physician recounted a particularly devastating case in which a woman was reportedly raped for 2 days until she lost her ability to speak. At the notorious Sid Taiman detention center, where Israeli soldiers detained Palestinian civilians from Gaza without charge, UNRWA documented a harrowing testimony from a female prisoner. They asked the soldiers to spit on me, saying, "She is a bitch, she is from Gaza." They were beating us as we moved and saying they would put pepper on our sensitive parts. They pulled us, beat us. They took us in the bus to the Damon prison after 5 days. The male soldier took off our hijabs and they pinched us and touched our bodies, including our breasts. We were blindfolded and we were feeling them touching us, pushing our heads to the bus. We started to squeeze together to try to protect ourselves from the touching. They said, "Bitch, bitch." They told the soldiers to take off their shoes and slap our faces with them. The Sid Diamond detention facility became the center of international outrage after 10 Israeli soldiers were arrested for the brutal gang rape of a Palestinian detainee held without charge. The attack was captured on film, was further compounded by widespread Israeli public support for the perpetrators. This support came from members of the government, media, and the so-called right to rape protests, which defended the soldiers' actions. Adding to the disturbing nature of the incident, Israel's Haninu Legal Aid Organization, which represented 4 of the accused soldiers, claimed their clients were acting in what? Self-defense.
For what? For how?
Yeah. Please explain. Yeah, I wish I knew. So
I would love to hear the mental gymnastics of how they would defend that. I would love to hear it.
Anyway, Sid Timon was not alone in facing accusations of systemic sexual abuse. As early as January of 2024, the Public Committee Against Torture in Israel, which I'm surprised there is one, provided testimonies in a report about systemic torture. One prison, held in Ketzayat prison, revealed the following. Wardens would conduct searches while the prisoners were naked, placed naked prisoners against each other, and placed the aluminum device used in the searches in their buttocks. In another instance, the wardens passed a card in a prisoner's buttocks. All of this took place in sight of other prisoners and wardens, while the wardens took pleasure in beating the prisoners' genitals. Palestinian lawyer Collin, I'm going to butcher that last name, an Israeli citizen, revealed a harrowing, I would imagine, Mahatna, account from a survivor of the Ofer detention center in the West Bank. He cited the testimony of a 27-year-old Palestinian inmate who was subjected to brutal sexual violence. And I quote, a pipe from a fire extinguisher was used on a handcuffed prisoner, forcing him to lie on his stomach, stripping him of all his clothes, and inserting the pipe of the fire extinguisher into the prisoner's rectum. Then activating the extinguisher in front of the eyes of the other prisoners. So, yeah, not great. The numerous reports by ostensibly objective human rights groups and international organizations documenting Israeli systemic sexual abuse against Palestinians are supported by survivor testimony, eyewitness accounts, video footage, photographic evidence, and admissions from Israeli sources. Israel's claims of mass rape by Palestinians lack similar evidence. In fact, several of the purported Israeli eyewitnesses making these accusations have been exposed for fabricating their stories. Israeli emergency workers have implicated its manufacturing hoaxes, including the widely circulated claims of 40 beheaded babies hung on clothing lines, and fetuses removed from their mother's wombs. According to a UN report by Pramila Patton on October 7th, one such crime scene had been altered by a bomb squad and the bodies were moved. Additionally, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu fabricated a story about two boys killed in an attic, which he used in his address to the U.S. Congress in July 24th. Kakov Al-Qaim Levy was given a prominent platform in Western corporate media for her civil commission, forced to investigate allegations of sexual abuse by Hamas against Israelis. Israel's most trusted news outlet, Haaretz, even reported that she collected testimony after testimony, despite later acknowledging that no direct testimonies had been taken. So, any questions so far, Care Bear? You know, I know it's heavy, but
no,
I can continue. Yeah. After the Hamas mass rape allegations spread across U.S. media and were echoed by Western politicians, Levy, previously cited as an expert, was exposed by Israeli media for fraud and scamming donors. Ultimately, nothing emerged for her alleged investigative efforts. A new Israeli government report submitted to the UN relies on second-hand accounts from physicians and healthcare workers who interacted with former Israeli captives, but does not directly quote or name the individuals involved. While the report aligns with some previous findings, it introduces a new and striking claim. Two Israeli teenagers were allegedly forced to perform sexual acts on one another. Notably, this claim was absent from the initial submission by the Israeli Health Ministry and did not surface during the year-old prisoner exchange between Hamas and Israel. Israel's claims about mass sexual violence lack any hard evidence, victims, or testimonies to corroborate them. Yet, each new claim is covered uncritically by the Western corporate media. On the other hand, mountains of evidence documenting the systemic sexual violence committed against Palestinians are ignored in what can only be described as a deliberate cover-up. So, which we're about to get to that UN probe, right? So, this is out of ScheerPost. It's by the cradle, to be specific. Israeli officials have obstructed a UN investigation into alleged sexual crimes committed by Hamas fighters during the 7th October 2023 Operation Al-Aqsa Flood, fearing this would open the door to a probe into the rampant allegations of sexual violence against Palestinians inside Israeli torture camps. According to the report, the Israeli daily Haaretz Tel Aviv rejected a request from Pramila Patten, the UN Special Representative of the Secretary General on Sexual Violence and Conflict, to investigate the allegations against Hamas after she established that a necessary condition would be to access Israeli detention centers to probe claims against Israeli soldiers. So they were like, nah, I'm out. If you're going to do that, we don't need that. The clear concern is that Israel will be the one to be added to the blacklist of entities and countries that engage in sexual violence and conflicts, while the terrorist organization Hamas will actually remain off the list. Mia Shrakin, director of the International Department of the Israeli Women's Lobby, told Haaretz, which is just, Patton's office previously confirmed plans to explore a future mission to the region following invitations from both the PA, we're going to get to the PA in a segment later, and the Israeli government. So, Thursday reports comes mere days after Israeli prosecutor Moran Gaz confirmed during an interview with Yediot Ahronoth that no allegations of rape or sexual assault by Hamas on October 7th have been filed. In the end, we don't have any complaints, which was presented in the media compared to what will eventually come together will be entirely different, she said, adding that her office approached women's rights organizations and asked for cooperation. They told us that no one had approached them, she stressed. Multiple media outlets have debunked claims of Hamas rape on October 7th. Nevertheless, since the start of the Israeli genocide in Gaza, human rights organizations have documented dozens of accounts of the rampant sexual violence inflicted on Palestinians. In August, Israel's NGO B'Tselem published a report titled Welcome to Hell, containing testimonies from 55 Palestinians detailing incidents of torture, rape, violence, humiliation, starvation, and denial of adequate medical treatment, which I do believe we covered that, correct?
Yes, we did.
This report came days after the military police arrested 8 Israeli prison guards on suspicion of raping a male Palestinian prisoner at the notorious Sid Taiman camp. A doctor at the Army Detention Center facility at Sid Taiman, so this is the doctor at that facility, Professor Yoel Donchin, said that after seeing the Palestinian detainee who was gang raped, he, quote, couldn't believe an Israeli prison guard could do such a thing. What? When? You saw it on camera. You still don't believe it? If they maintain a hospital only for the sake of defending ourselves at the ICJ, that's no good, the doctor said. Which, like, that's what he's saying it was. That whole hospital for them is just so that they don't get called out on not having it. Following the guard's arrest, Israeli settlers, far-right activists, and Knesset members started riots breaking into Sid Taiman and the nearby Bet Laid army base in defense of the soldiers. Even after the rioters breached the entrances, no one was arrested or even identified by Israeli police. I wonder why. Closing thoughts, Care Bear?
We'll get to this later, but again, as I said in the first segment, the idea of a ceasefire, while it sounds good to many people who on the surface level have called for it, and think that, it can lead to more. The reality is, at minimum, it's the idea of, okay, some, from what I'm seeing online at least, not all, but some of the Palestinian people who were imprisoned, most, if not all, under no fault of their own, will be released. But there's no account of the torture that they've gone through, the pain and the ridicule that they have gone through, no accountability for what the Israeli soldiers did to them. I haven't heard anything of that. So the idea that you think that a ceasefire is actually going to do something, it doesn't account for anything like this. And I'll argue this has been happening for decades. This is not recent. So, okay, yeah, you're going to have prisoners set free, but many of them are so damaged that how they're even going to function. And besides all that, like, you're giving these prisoners, I mean, these, these detainers, Israeli detainers, the option to do it again, given the opportunity. Because again, a ceasefire is just that, is a temporary pause. So when everything starts back up, which it will, either these people that they let go will probably be back in there, or there'll just be more people to put in their place where they're able to torture.
Yeah.
Rinse, lather, repeat. So it's just frustrating and honestly kind of disgusting that this kind of behavior is kind of encouraged. But then again, we do the same. Let's keep it real.
Oh yeah, go look at American prisons.
Right. We do the same
see
shit.
What guards do there.
Right. So, to implicate Israel is to implicate ourselves. So there's absolutely no way that we're actually going to call out probably our closest ally, quote unquote, at this point.
Yeah, it's just sad and maddening, but it's definitely the reason we're demonetized talking about stories like that. So, appreciate any monetary help you can give by scanning that QR code, going to the URL co-fi.com/indienewsnetwork. Appreciate any support you can give. Links are always in the description below, as they frequently are. And if you can't give, we appreciate just some algorithm boosting, liking and subscribing, hitting the share button, leaving a comment, letting us know what you think. And I apologize for the heavy segment, but otherwise, thanks for watching. Cool. People jump into chats. Cynic got here and then had to leave because the segment was terrible. I with you on that. So sucked reading it. But
it sucked reading it, but again, it gives context. I hope this gives context to the last two stories. And as I said, I hate talking about Israel all the fucking time, but I think in this case it makes sense given this ceasefire deal, quote unquote, and all the things that haven't been mentioned around that again, Palestinians need justice for. Like, okay, what they're getting. We're going to go into it next, but they're not really getting anything out of this. It's just Israel essentially is just moving borders a little bit and and seeing some reports of Palestinians having the right to return, but to return to what? Like, homes are destroyed. Gaza is destroyed. Like, what are they? There's no home to go home to. Like,
and by the time they get anything rebuilt, they're gonna tear it down again.
So we're gonna get that into a few minutes, but so it's like all this context that our media is not talking about on purpose is because the actual thing is really not the issue here. The issue here is the idea of what is being done to keep these people accountable for the oppression that they put these people under, and how would they receive justice from that. And as I said to you off camera, until they start talking, I don't know, it's going to make some Black people pissed, but unless there's talk about reparations for the Palestinian people, it's nothing. So
they get that entire country themselves. You know, but what do I know? So, yep. Let me look through the chats real quick.
Yeah, I got
bad cookies.
So Vicky,
man, this is fucking heavy. Fuck those Zionazis. Yep. You had what?
So Vicky Adams, she said a couple of comments. She said, "Right to our word. That's a new one. How do they make that okay?" That's what I said. How can they justify that? She also said the ceasefire may be tied to training the trainers for cop cities.
Yeah, that's possible.
Yes.
You know,
like, do you really think that this ceasefire is going to like make the Palestinians' lives any better? No. You know, America well, let me clarify. The elites need the police and the corporations need the police in order to protect them.
Yeah.
So they need to kind of keep this going. So there's absolutely no way like they're going to cut that off.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, it's tied to training the trainers for cop cities.
Yeah.
Which is also tied to the story that Reef just talked about.
Yep.
So yeah. So Vicky said it's a
business deal.
It's a business deal in the for them in the best possible way. Yes.
Old Monarch says we need lots of things abolished. Anything with direct ties to Zionism and scams. You know,
have a good time with your Bitcoin, your crypto, and everything else that you're playing with.
Something like that. Whatever else you're playing with. Anyway, you ready for our next one? It's gonna be a doozy. Strap in, folks.
All right. So look at my thumbnail.
It looks good.
Now I'm really proud of it now.
It looks good.
So I did. When did I make this? I made this Monday. I modified it last night.
Mm-hmm.
But then there really wasn't anything sure at that point. So we're more sure now than we were on Monday when I said, okay, well, we're going to have to do this. But I said that knowing the story at the time was going to develop, and definitely after this, it will continue to develop. So I will preface by saying, as I said earlier, a lot of the information, even now, might be slightly outdated because a lot of the information, the majority of it, I pulled Monday and yesterday. And even today, there's more information came out, and shout out to Reef for helping me with this. We were adding stuff up until just before we
5 minutes before, live. Yeah.
Right. So, you know, so as a result of this, it might be a little messy. It might not be as coherent as I would like it to be. But I am a person who, as I said earlier, I'm a person who has a real job. Yeah. I'm a person that doesn't have a lot of time to watch everything online and try to make everything all clean and all of that kind of stuff to make it more palatable, obviously, for you in order to listen or to watch.
Better than you think. You know, you pull this Monday, it's not going to be too ridiculous.
Right. You know? But I will also be honest to say, some of the takes that I heard about this ceasefire, if you can call it that at all, really bothered me, but even among people in our space that should know better. Because a lot of the takes that I'm seeing is that either this was a win for Trump and he's not president yet, like Trump was the deal maker behind the scenes, or Biden actually did something good finally to actually like call this ceasefire when now, like days before he's getting the boot. Neither one of them did shit.
No.
And I didn't like the takes that some people had in like, oh, this makes Trump look good. No, Trump is going to do the exact same shit, if not worse. I'm still holding on to that.
It just happens. The Democratic Party will be done. They were already done. They were done in 2016.
But also, as I said, Trump is going to need the police to protect his ass as well as his assets, as well as the assets of his cronies. And don't forget, Biden's cabinet is still made up of Zionist shills, which we reported on as well. So there's absolutely no way they're going to not protect themselves from the onslaught that they're going to get from the masses. And they're counting on the masses to be ignorant because they don't know any better. They don't know all of the information that you guys probably know from watching even a little bit of independent media that you do see. So they're going to go out on the streets with all this tech that the police have and going to be pummeled in a lot worse way than they were 4 years ago.
So basically, like this, if you don't take the day it takes to actually look through stuff, go to those sources you trust, see what they're saying, a lot of narrative control is going to be happening, on all sides from everyone. So,
and I'm just afraid even in our space at times tends to use sources that are more corporate or a little bit more mainstream. Like the idea of like people pushing for a ceasefire as an all-end-all. And I said, and I've been very...
We've had that problem forever.
Like a ceasefire is really the floor. Yeah. Like that's not really what they look. So
we've talked to Vanessa Beeley about it. We've talked to Eva about it.
Right.
On air.
People calling
You're
for a
to go look
ceasefire, like even at the protests that I was going to, was not it. And I said that openly. But that being said, look, and I'm not the smartest person, I'm not really a political guy. As I keep saying, I'm a guy that cares and kind of has the understanding that our politics are interwoven into everything that we do. So it's just a matter of just being aware of that and try to make those connections as best as I can. So I don't admit myself to be an expert on really any of this, even though, I just share a lot of people who actually do the work to you here.
Yeah.
I'm very privileged that I have this small of a platform to be able to do that. But that being said, I'm a guy with an opinion, a guy that tries to find patterns in life and try to make those connections. And I try to make opinions based on what I see and what I hear, and kind of having a more cynical mindset in terms of what is really going on. And I have to thank Reef for that because he's even more cynical than me. So he's able to look at this a little more of a side eye than even I can sometimes.
I didn't think this deal was going to happen at all. So,
that being said, let's get into it.
Yep.
So again, this will probably be a messy segment, so forgive me in that. But we hope that we're able to kind of clean it up and it will kind of make sense toward the end. So let's start with, again, this was pulled Monday. This report from Truth Out. This was before, actually, this will kind of run into the story that is this deal.
Yep.
So this article was pulled by Truth Out, written by, I wouldn't say friend to the show, but she is
frequently brought
Indie Award winner, right?
Yep, I do believe so.
Yep. Sharon Zhang, who reports that Israel-Hamas hostage swap deal close to completion, reports say, and actually that's still probably true. The media has described the deal as a ceasefire, quote unquote, but Israel is demanding it be allowed to continue its attacks. Keep that in mind. We're going to get into that a little later.
Yep.
So Sharon reports, Israel and Hamas are nearing a deal for a hostage swap and temporary pause in fighting, which is exactly what a ceasefire is, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Various sources say, but Israeli leaders are reportedly insisting that any deal allowed the military to continue their assault and occupation on Gaza. So in other words, free the hostages, we'll free ours, but we have permission, but we're still going to bomb the shit out of it. Sources from both sides, as well as U.S. officials, said on Monday that negotiations have reached a breakthrough point and a deal may be reached within the next few days, which is now up until day, sort of, I guess. So, again, this is, keep this with a grain of salt. Again, as I said, this was messy and not sources that we will likely use, but we'll get into better sources later. This is from Dropsite, who is, you said, and I didn't know this until prior, is they're associated with Ryan Grimm and them.
Yeah.
So, so not to say they don't do good stuff from time to time, but not sources that we reliably trust.
Yeah.
So keep this with a grain of salt. But
no,
we want to try and bring
they
some
get given
nuance.
the stories by the government to put out,
right?
And a lot of it's fucking dog shit.
But we do want to give some nuance. So, I think in essence to kind of understand where we're coming from in terms of this is mostly where a lot of people even in our space are pulling a lot of the information from to report.
Yeah.
Which is what I think is kind of driving some of the takes.
Which is
that
why it's nonsense.
Right. So
from them.
Just to give you that context, I do think it's important for you to kind of make the distinction between what we're kind of saying is to what we consider to be better. So can you zoom in, please?
Yes, sir.
So Dropsite reported, this was pulled on Monday, report 3,000 Palestinian captives to be released from Israeli prisons in the proposed deal. A Palestinian source involved in ceasefire negotiations told Dropsite News' Jeremy Scahill that final draft is under discussion from both sides. Hamas has submitted its reports to a framework for a deal that includes new Israeli demands. This draft has now been sent to Israel for approval. While Israel responded positively to some proposals, a full response is still pending. Jakura Fares, I guess that's how you say their name, head of the Palestinian Prisoners Affairs, scroll down, authority, revealed that the proposed agreement would involve the release of over 3,000 Palestinian prisoners, including 200 serving life sentences. Fares is saying that the first stage of the deal would exchange 25 Israeli captives in Gaza for 48 Palestinians previously freed in the 2011 Shalit deal, 200 life-sentenced prisoners, and another 1,000 prisoners, including all women, children, and those with medical conditions currently held in Israeli prisons. While most freed prisoners are expected to return to their homes in Jerusalem, Gaza, and the West Bank if they have any homes left to go to, Fares noted that those serving life sentences may be jolted to Qatar, Egypt, or Turkey to avoid assassination threats from Israel. He described this option as both necessary and strategic.
Keep in mind, Qatar and like those three cities are also what helped in the downfall of Syria recently. So
right. Scroll up.
Yep.
Fares also reported that Israel has demanded 9 more captives, including wounded soldiers, be included in the initial phase in exchange for a large number of life-sentenced Palestinian prisoners. These terms remain under negotiation. The Israeli military told Reuters that approximately 6,000 Palestinians from Gaza are currently held in Israeli custody in what human rights group Tselem describes as a network of torture camps, where Israel carries out systematic torture or an abuse and holds detainees in humane conditions, which you just reported in our previous segment. The Palestinian Prisoners Club, in its latest count, reports that Israel is detaining 10,300 Palestinians across its prisons and detention facilities. Of these, 3,376 are being held under administrative detention without any charge or trial. In a conversation with DropSite News last week, Mohammed Shahad explains that Israel has been detaining hundreds of additional Palestinians to gain leverage in future prisoner swap negotiations. So basically all of that is to kind of give the details as to this swap, quote unquote, that is supposed to be happening.
Got more info from Fee in a bit on that.
So going back to the article, President Joe Biden and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reportedly discussed negotiations over the last weekend as negotiators have worked to reach a deal before Donald Trump's inauguration on Monday at the time of this recording. U.S. and other officials have said numerous times over the past months that they're in near an agreement, just for the agreement to fall apart due to Israel's unwillingness to stop its genocide. Media reports have described the pending deal as a ceasefire agreement. That in all should give you pause. The negotiation parties are reportedly still simply negotiating over the ceasefire framework that the Biden administration introduced and that Hamas negotiators accepted in May. Palestinian journalist Mohammed Shahada has pointed out that even the list of captives set to be released is the same that what was discussed in June.
In June. Yeah.
Right. So he gives more information on that in this tweet. The ceasefire swap deal being negotiated now, it's literally the exact same deal Hamas accepted on May 6th and July 2nd last year, what is known as, quote unquote, Biden's proposal. The reason why a deal was never finalized is because Netanyahu has been imposing new last-minute conditions all the time. So it's been basically 8 months of the U.S. pressing Hamas to accept more and more Israeli dictates to get Netanyahu on board, but he keeps adding new ones. For instance, restricting the return of 1 million displaced Gazians to the northern half, the IDF stays in the Tezarine and Philadelphia corridors and eastern buffer zone that constitutes about 33% of Gaza's area, increasing the number of hostages released in the first phase, demanding a list of living Israeli hostages, insisting on exiling many released Palestinian captives, demanding the release of captive IDF soldiers in the first phase instead of the second. Israel creates a new buffer zone in northern Gaza, Beit Hanun and Beit Lahia, installing checkpoints with facial recognition cameras on the routes of Gazians returning to the north. Now, why in the fuck would you do that if you're trying to free them? Yeah. So, insisting on a temporary pause for 8 weeks and then back to war instead of a ceasefire. So remember when Kamala said back in the spring, we want a temporary ceasefire?
Yes.
Pause for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So you're giving these people the chance to go, and again, home to what? Only for 6 weeks to end, and you're going to blow them up in what is basically rubble at this point. Okay. All of these terms violated Biden's proposal that the UNSC endorsed in June, but Biden never called out Netanyahu and instead chose to cover up his failure/refusal to pressure Israel by putting all the blame on Hamas and, quote-unquote, rewriting history, as Arab mediators put it. Without pressure on Israel, a deal will never be signed, and forever negotiations will be the norm. So,
yep.
Anyway, but reports say that current deal would not involve a permanent ceasefire whatsoever, rather only a pause in fighting. And it's questionable whether Israel would even adhere to the pause, because even as of now, they're not, as negotiators have insisted on keeping troops in Gaza, and Israeli forces have reportedly continued violating a ceasefire agreement in Lebanon. The New York Times reports that Netanyahu wants a partial deal that only allows for the release of hostages and that will allow Israel to resume fighting afterward, demanding that language be added to the deal to give Israel the ability to do so. Hamas negotiators have suggested that they will not agree to a deal that doesn't involve the permanent ceasefire. So basically, Netanyahu wants, I want to continue killing them. And the Hamas is saying, no, we actually want you to stop entirely. So that's what has been the impasse, always has been. Right. So from the beginning. So, but the idea is like, oh, Hamas was being unreasonable. No. So even more, current hurdles to a deal includes Israel's insistence that it be able to maintain a permanent military presence in Gaza. No. Over a land that Israel has kept enlarging over the course of negotiations. Over the summer, Netanyahu dug his heels in on permanent military occupation on a strip of land along Gaza's border with Egypt, as well as the Netrazim corridor that Israel has used to split Gaza into a northern and southern region. So basically right now, North Gaza is...
Which reminds me again where that canal was supposed to go?
In the north.
Yeah.
Which is again destroyed because everyone has basically been pushed down to this. So now Israel is also demanding military control over an expanded buffer zone along Gaza's eastern and northern borders with Israel. Israeli negotiators have asked for a depth of 2,000 meters or over 1.2 miles into the small territory. We believe this means that 60 kilometers or 37 miles of the Gaza Strip will remain under their control and displaced people will not return to their homes, one Hamas negotiator told CNN. Meanwhile, some Israeli officials are opposed to the deal. Financial Minister Bezalel Smotrich, one of the most extremist members of Netanyahu's government, said on Monday that a deal is a catastrophe because it involves the release of Palestinian prisoners, most of whom Israel holds without charges. Smotrich openly called for the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. As you can see in this tweet, Google had to translate. But he tweeted, the emerging deal is a catastrophe for the national security of the state of Israel. We will not be a part of a surrender deal that would include releasing terrorist hostages, stopping the war, and dissolving its achievements that were brought on with much blood and banding many hostages. This is the time to continue with all of our might to occupy and cleanse the entire strip, to finally take control of humanitarian aid from Hamas, and to open the gates of hell on Gaza until Hamas surrenders completely and all the hostages are returned. So, basically, the worst of the worst are saying no deal.
Yep.
Right. So again, kind of moving forward. So fast forward to yesterday. Again, the deal wasn't made yet, but it looked very close. And there were people online that were being somewhat optimistic about this. So MVP of this segment definitely goes to Fiorella Isabel, friend of the show, whose job is to get all of this right. And there's going to be a lot of tweets from her because I think there was a lot of what's the word you would say?
Bullshit would be the one I would go with.
I wouldn't say that, but sure. So Israel being right. So Israel, Sophie being the saint of common sense, tweeted, Israel angry at Trump for the ceasefire deal. Yeah, with the incoming Allison-owned most Zionist administration, the goal is to end Palestine. The end of normalizations here. Notice that this happened after Syria's fall. Many getting played like fiddles by political manipulations, which includes many of our friends. So zoom out, please. So she continues, this is like the Ukrainian-Russia talks we've long planned. This next administration will position itself as cleaning up the last. The deal is set in play to give Trump leverage and continue the apartheid, genocidal conditions existing before October 7th, plus focus on the West Bank, which we've talked about, like, which barely gets any attention in mainstream media. Like, and I'll argue the real prize is the West Bank, because they've been selling that territory this whole time. And we reported how they essentially want to annex the entire region to Israel right now. But that's what people are not talking about. Go ahead.
Yep. Oh, I was saying that, like, that's if, like, he's given no indication he's really willing to do any of those things. Like, he's still willing to fight in Ukraine, still willing to do that, right? Especially with his cabinet the way it is, you know. Like, that's if. Most of the time, if it's going to be anything, it's just going to be smoke screens to, like, act like
and
he's trying.
And we know, especially given the last administration, how Trump is very sensitive to persuasion. It doesn't take a whole lot for Trump to be swayed
in any direction.
Any way that would benefit him or make him look good. So,
and what makes his friends the most money.
Right.
So, meanwhile,
but anyway, he continues. Israel will continue expanding per the existing Greater Israel Project, now with its HTS terrorists in Syria, leaning the way toward Lebanon, and with an administration ready to go to war with Iran if it can muster the excuse. Syria was harbinger of normalization. One last thing regarding Israel. How many times would some of you forget that every time Israel is angry at Trump or Biden or Trump, we literally continue funding them with billions. How easily duped most continue to be, led by carrots instead of seeing the strings.
Yep.
Hurrah, hooray, hooray for ceasefire. This was, again, Fee. Shout out to Fee because she is speaking prophetically.
Yeah.
Again, she posted this on Tuesday. By today, a lot of people in our space were doing this. Somewhat.
Please.
Exactly, mostly what she's saying here. Hooray, hooray, a ceasefire. Trump did what Biden couldn't. We shouldn't have had over a year of genocide, and while you chill Israel, we'll continue working on the slow death of Palestine and the entire region, backed by the U.S., and then as the long-aligned axis are picked one by one.
Yep.
So I pulled this because this was from a thread that I was having with Savvy. So Jason Chukwuma said, if Bibi concedes on Gaza, it's because he wants to be in Trump's good graces for the real prize, annexation of the West Bank. He wanted to do it during Trump's first term, but got too much pushback. There won't be any more of that this time. So he tweeted this article. I assume it's from the Washington Post.
Yeah.
Actually, if you go up, Netanyahu facing tough Israel election pledges to annex a third of West Bank, which was published in 2019.
2019. Okay, good. Great.
So,
glad no one
actually,
listened.
we'll go into that a little bit because as I said, I feel the West Bank right now is really the grand prize here. So this is from the Middle East Eye. We're going to get into Shmulevich in this now, where they write, Mahira Al-Adam reports, Israeli Shmulevich takes measures to fast-track West Bank settlement building. Weekly meetings established by Financial Minister Bezalel Smotrich are expected to significantly raise the amount of land seizures in this year. Smotrich has taken new measures to ensure the acceleration of illegal settlements in the occupied West Bank with minimal U.S. involvement or political approval. Now, can you imagine Trump preventing this?
No.
No. Smolarich has been seeking to expand land seizures through occupied Palestinian territory, outlawed under international law, by a new mechanism that will allow for weekly settlement building permits, which previously took months to be approved. According to the Israeli newspaper Yedioth Ahronoth,
Ynet.
Did I say it right?
Yep.
These measures have been taken despite U.S.-Israeli tensions over illegal settlements and violent settler activity, as well as guidelines set by the United States that allow Israel to build a few settlements only near the designated green line. Can you scroll up? Because, yeah. This 1949 armistice line is an area that separates the Palestinian territories of the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Gaza Strip from Israel. Niet reported that Smolarich Settlement Administration, which is responsible for land seizures in the West Bank, aims at normalizing settlement planning by holding meetings on a weekly basis where discussions would lead to the approval of new settlements. So again, this is planning to happen this year. So you can argue with Biden, this has been somewhat limited, but Trump will give this,
green lights
will give
everywhere.
no fucks about this. So he will just be like, go ahead, like, increase the settlements. In the past, land grabs took months to be approved, and meetings to discuss such decisions were held once every 3 months. The weekly committee meetings are expected to significantly raise the amount of land seizures in 2025 compared to previous years. In the past week alone, so this article was written also yesterday, I believe, around 440 housing units were processed to be approved. Moreover, the building of 2,377 units have been advanced by the Supreme Planning Council in just the last 6 weeks.
Yeah.
The Peace Now movement, one of the largest in Israel working to promote a two-state solution, bullshit, but has criticized the large-scale settlement construction in the West Bank, noting that this is a result of policies introduced by the Netanyahu-Smolarich government. This systematic approach aims to normalize settlement planning and attract less public and international attention and criticism, the self-proclaimed left-wing Zionist group added. Settlement infrastructure, which has been carved out of lands only Israeli citizens are allowed to access, have been described by several human rights groups as a system of apartheid. The green line mentioned in the U.S. regulations on settlements has been hugely controversial among right-wing, far-right Israelis who have been outraged by how slow they perceived settlement construction to be. It's observed that we have to wait long months to promote construction in approved locations, and no one was bothered by it. Now, fundamental changes are being made that bring normalcy to 500,000 residents. A cell official told you again, this is happening now.
Yep.
Like, you think a ceasefire is happening, folks? Since the 1967 Middle East War, Israel has decided to omit the Green Line from its maps, making the Palestinian territories it has occupied appear as being part of the state. Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank are legal under international law. However, Israel has continued to build settlements across the occupied territory over the past several decades. Around 700,000 Israeli settlers live in roughly 300 illegal settlements in the West Bank and occupied East Jerusalem, all of which have been built under since Israel captured the territories in the 1967 conflict. Smolarich has been spearheading this trend. In October, he called for an aggressively expansionist Israeli policy, saying the country should expand little by little until its borders reach the Syrian capital of Damascus. Meanwhile, on Monday, Israeli Housing Minister Yitzhak Goldachov called on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to facilitate the illegal settlement of 1 million Jews in the occupied West Bank. Speaking to a Hebrew site, Bashir al-Hadim, which covers news related to Haredi Jews, Goldachov urged Netanyahu to bring 1 million Jews to Judea and Samaria, the Israeli term for the West Bank. Gorbachev also called for the Gaza onslaught to be leveraged to ramp up settlement and construction of the area.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I'll take this if you want. So,
sure, go ahead.
Here's Fee posting today, right? And this is a thread everyone should go retweet and like if you can. But she says, breaking, a ceasefire and hostage deal between Israel and Hamas has been reached following the Qatari PM's meeting with Hamas and Israeli negotiators. Comes into effect in 24 hours, and Qatar, Egypt, and the U.S. will guarantee it. Quote, Israel will vote on it Thursday. Here are my terms and my opinions. So here are terms and my opinions. So we'll get to this. So first clause, the complete withdrawal of Israeli forces to the borders from all areas of the Gaza Strip. Second clause, the opening of the Rafah crossing and the complete withdrawal from it. Third clause, Israel must facilitate the travel of the wounded for treatment abroad. So those seem pretty decent. Sixth clause, Israel must allow the entry of 600 aid trucks daily under humanitarian protocol sponsored by Qatar. Right?
That should be at minimum.
Yes.
At minimum.
Right. Israel must allow, and there's again issues with Qatar, so Israel must allow for the entry of 200,000 tents and 60,000 caravans for the urgent shelter. Eighth clause of prisoner exchange, including the release of 1,000 prisoners from Gaza and hundreds of detainees serving life sentences of lengthy terms. So she's just laying out some of these facts real quick. Ninth clause, all displaced persons must return to their residential areas and their freedom of movement throughout the Gaza Strip must be guaranteed. 10th clause, all hostile aircraft must leave the skies over the Gaza Strip for 8 to 10 hours daily. All hospitals must be rehabilitated and field hospitals must be permitted entry into the Gaza Strip as well as medical and surgical teams. So that's that. But she also says that Netanyahu's government has stated this isn't final. Very clear. Right. Other potential additions have included clearing the occupation prisons of all women and children under 19 years old. Israeli withdrawal from the Netzarim corridor and the Philadelphia corridor is up for debate because the AP says Hamas dropped this while others say otherwise. So that could cause some wrenches in this overall anyway. The first phase will last 42 days in exchange for the delivery of 33 Israeli prisoners, including living and dead bodies. Israel would release 30 Palestinian prisoners for each civilian hostage and 50 for each female soldier. Supposed into fighting, while Israeli forces would move out of populated areas to the edges of the Strip, displaced Palestinians would allegedly begin returning home as more aid enters the Strip. The second phase is 42 days, declaration of sustainable calm. Whatever that means. Hamas frees remaining male hostages, soldiers and civilians in exchange for yet to be negotiated number of Palestinian prisoners and a full withdrawal of Israeli troops from the Gaza Strip. Phase 3, the bodies of deceased Israeli hostages would be exchanged for bodies of deceased Palestinian fighters. An alleged implementation of a reconstruction plan in Gaza in exchange for a 3 to 5 year reconstruction plan be carried out in Gaza under international supervision, and the crossings for movement and in and out of Gaza would be reopened.
Right.
Here's Fee's opinions.
These are the same plans. We've talked about those. That we've talked about that over the summer. That those were the plans that Hamas approved, more or less, and Israel's like, nah. So these are, as we reported earlier, pretty much exactly the same as it was back then.
Yep. So Fee's problem with this, and it's not to take the joy away from stopping any of the physical bombs and slayings of Palestinians, which I, of course, with many, welcome, but to point out the reality, which the fact she even has to say that, like, right. You know.
Look, and I'll save that because I'd
love to be overly hopeful.
I will get more into that toward the end, though. So,
but the reality, one, Israel hasn't respected any ceasefire and is under no obligation to do so because there's been zero fucking consequences when it doesn't.
Right.
Two,
and I go ahead.
Go ahead. Two, no, Israel has not. Yes. Yep.
That's key. It's the idea of like, if Israel doesn't do it, what's the
consequences?
What consequences?
Right.
There are none.
Yeah.
And there's, and again, kind of going back to what I was saying in the last segment, this stuff, while nice, it's really the floor.
Yeah.
It's the idea of like, arrest Bibi for at least his complicity in war crimes as of now, and along with his cabinet, like arrest any Israeli guard responsible for torturing these Palestinians put in prison. Fuck over the IDF, dismantle it, whatever you want, however you want. Like, there should be a fire of justice coming down hard on Israel right now. But right now, it just seems like just return the hostages and rebuild, and that's it. If that. And give them food. That's it. That's not going to get even, like, there has to be accountability. There has to be a turning in terms of how Israelis feel about Palestinians. You can argue vice versa, but you need to argue that there needs to be an actual mental thing that needs to occur, which is partly due to the poison that is Zionism that needs to be completely destroyed, which obviously that's going to take a lot longer, but that also needs to be mentioned. And the fact that they don't mention it here, you're only going to perpetuate a lot of these racist and genocidal tendencies that is going to keep going. Like, just building infrastructure, rebuilding it is not going to be enough if you're not restructuring your mindset as well, which you're not getting into here. So
2, Israel has not given assurances. In fact, Netanyahu has threatened Israel could use new military action to pressure Hamas in negotiations, or could resume its military campaign. So, open reason for them to just go right back to what they were doing. So, 3, Netanyahu's office said in a statement that it hopes details will be worked out by Wednesday night, Thursday, with the plan still needing approval from the Netanyahu security cabinet and his full cabinet, which is likely to approve what he proposed, but not a guarantee.
So if you're watching this as of now, because it's Wednesday night now, we haven't heard anything, at least not yet. If you have in the comments, let us know.
Yeah. So let me also go find this again. So supposedly Qatar, the US, and Egypt would provide guarantees. This is followed, though. The problem is the US funds Israel expansion and genocide. Egypt is controlled by the US and Israel to the point of closing the Rafah crossing, and Qatar has deep relations with the West, as is, which let me go find his tweet because I apparently didn't grab the full thing. But Donald Trump's being hailed as one who reached this, but it looks like it's been the plan for a while, meaning that the Biden admin, to start it all, set it out to end it now for a reason. Trump can gloat as he is, but this was clearly set in motion now for a reason, which that's my thing, is what are those reasons? You know? So, but any thoughts so far, Care Bear? While I go look for this?
No, I mean, again, it's just, how are you going to ensure that Israel is going to do any of it? And again, a lot of this, I guess at best, is over, like, after these phases where it's like a few weeks. Like, the rebuild is like 3 to 5 years. I would argue it's probably going to really, if you really wanted to do a good job at this point, considering how decimated Gaza is, at least 10. Like, I'm not sure of like how long it would take to build, like, given we've seen the pictures. Like,
right.
I would imagine it would take decades to rebuild everything that they had to how it was before. And again, that does not even include the mental trauma that a lot of these people, again, these are a lot of children.
Oh, for sure.
That if they're alive, will have to we have to say that, because right now they're having I don't want to say an extremist mindset, but they're not going to have great feelings about what has been happening to that homeland right now. So there's still going to be a lot of that anger and pain sentiment among these kids. So, which is, I think, part of the reason, the justification that we don't want to get out entirely, because there's still this threat of, like, again, the idea of like a Palestinian leader rising up from the ashes, so to speak. So that's why they're kind of saying, we'll pull out for a little bit, but we want the opportunity to bomb them should, and I'm going to say like a Jesus-like figure, like
pops up
arises
again
from this. Right.
So the problem in these U.S. funds Israel's expansion and genocide. Egypt is controlled by the U.S. and Israel to the point of closing the Rafah crossing, and Qatar has deep relations with the West, as well at the expense of Palestine. None of the Gulf states would have done much to help Gaza. How could this be fair? It wouldn't be. So, number 7, the Lebanese election with an anti-Hezbollah leader as victor leaves the country vulnerable as it stands off with Israel. Worth noting that Hezbollah has never only relied on the political wing and will continue fighting. It's just going to be more difficult re-Syria. Yes, Israel has lost many soldiers and has not achieved its goals of eliminating Hamas, but they have killed hundreds of thousands in Palestine. Hold on, let me find it.
You have to do it for the next one, too.
So Israel has lost many soldiers, has not achieved its goal of eliminating Hamas, but they've killed hundreds of thousands of Palestinians and not received a single punishment, but rather support from the West and little condemnation from the non-aligned Axis, save a few under the mantle of Judaism for them and terrorism for Hamas. It's no coincidence that we're seeing this all happen now with a change of face in the U.S., while the same long-planned foreign policy will continue. Number 9. No one's talking about the fact that Israel's been taking up more and more land in the occupied West Bank with the help of the PA. Funny that, we're going to get to that in the next segment, Fee. It's only a matter of time before they fully take over unless there's a miraculous push to stop Israel in the U.S., which, looking at Syria, is unlikely. Number 10. It's obvious. The obvious elephant in the room is the incoming Trump admin has the most Zionist cabinet Fee has ever seen. People who think Gaza should be flattened have I Love Israel X bios, not to mention the million in Adelson money. This doesn't magically go away because of a highly political manipulated deal. That's naive. I keep mentioning Syria because this will be the key for us all, especially analysts, to understand how our wishes do not reflect reality. Without Syria, things for the Axis have become realistically incredibly difficult and devastating, and I believe this will bring an era of normalization. Iran's Pezeshkian isn't the only one in charge, but his tendencies towards liberalism don't serve the resistance's interests for the country or of the Axis and non-aligned Axis. Iran is also vulnerable with the Trump administration, which is already vilified and accused it of everything from election interference to assassination attempts and bringing bombs over the border. It will be a focus for the incoming administration. This also has been long planned. The question is, will Iran, as it seems from some statements, normalize relations with Washington or continue to stand their ground? Will DC see Pezeshkian as an opponent to pounce? It seems likely. 13. In summary, it's too early to tell what the ceasefire actually is, but what I see coming from any ceasefire the U.S. and Israel agree to is the return to pre-October 7th treatment of Palestinians, while continuing to slow death of Gaza and quicker takeover of the entire region. Nothing, as I stated, happens coincidentally, and timing is everything. After Syria, Nothing will be the same, and I don't exaggerate the levels of betrayal we are seeing on many facets of non-aligned axis. More will be revealed in due time, I'm sure. So, definitely wanted to bring Fee's stuff on this. You brought this, right?
Yeah. Which, honestly, if we were doing this segment in under 5 minutes...
It would just be this?
Just be this.
I don't remember if I got Pasta's tweet, but I'll bring that as well. Because it pertains. I thought I grabbed it. Come on, tweets. Do the thing. Hopefully. Come on. Does anybody really buy this BS? Israel has gained territory in Lebanon and Syria. They have either killed or displaced almost half the population of Gaza. Trump set the table for all these actions of the Zionist nation, and you believe that he's to be celebrated? This was all set up to dupe you, and it's working.
Yes.
So, good stuff from Pasta, you know. You brought this, I think.
Yeah, some diplomatic disaster. History will write of breakthroughs that were strategically timed and territories exchanged under the guise of peace. Ceasefires should heal wounds, not redraw maps in the shadows of diplomacy. I agree.
Fee added an hour ago. By the way, in case you all missed this, Trump said that he would use the ceasefire deal as momentum to expand the Abraham Accords, U.S.-backed agreement struck during his first presidency in 2017 that normalized Israel's relation with several Arab countries. So that's also a factor. In Lakesh's, Israel launches a large series of airstrikes on Gaza City after the ceasefire announcement, immediately after news emerged that Israeli soldiers were killed in Beit Hanun. The ceasefire is yet to go in effect, and Israel often ramps up its massacres at this time. Yep, they try to get their licks in before they can't, or they got to take a break, you know? So, and this bit I put in South Lebanon, Israel's war is not finished. So while this may be a ceasefire for however long it's going to be a ceasefire, they're still bombing other places. So, you know, not everything is as it seems. More
from Fee.
And the Zionist entity and the most Zionist administration funded by AIPAC and Adelson wouldn't agree to a ceasefire that did not ultimately benefit them and Washington's ambitions. Be for fucking real. So, yeah. Daniel Fuchs thought for the day, never trust Israel, never trust Trump, never trust the U.S. So, words to live by. Sam Husseini, Palestinians getting killed even as they celebrate an apparent halt to their slaughter. So, yeah, I wouldn't celebrate this just yet.
Well, I'm going to give nuance to that later.
Yes, there's definitely some reasons to celebrate, but I think they're like short term.
Short term, right.
This Kavork, the ceasefire agreement will not erase Israeli actions in Gaza. The struggle for justice must continue until everyone between the river to the sea is recognized and treated with dignity as a human being. Patrick Henderson, 2 hours ago, when I pulled this, there won't be a ceasefire. So that's his statement. He doesn't think that they're going to cease fire. So I'm kind of with him on that. You bought Chris
Hedges. Israel, going back decades, has played the same duplicitous game. It signs a deal with the Palestinians that is to be implemented in phases. The first phase gives Israel what it wants, in this case, the release of the hostages, but Israel habitually fails to implement subsequent phases that would lead to a just and equitable peace. Hamas is seeking a permanent ceasefire, but Israel says it retains the right to re-engage militarily. Yep. There is no agreement about who will govern Gaza. Israel has made it clear that the continuance of Hamas in power is unacceptable. There's no mention of the status of UNRWA, the UN agency that Israel has outlawed and that provides the bulk of the humanitarian aid to the Palestinians, most of whom have been displaced. There is no agreement on the reconstruction of Gaza, much of which lies in rubble. And of course, there is no route to an independent and sovereign Palestinian state. There are many, many ways this can fall apart, as I expect it eventually will. But let us rejoice that, at least for the moment, the mass slaughter has stopped. So
Sunday, not right now.
Well, again, I want to give some nuance to this.
Yep.
Let me see if I can. Is that it? So to kind of end this somewhat, and to bring some goodness to all of this, here's a tweet from Miss Faustina, who, when Palestinian children heard about the ceasefire, obviously, here's their response.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, I said I should have put my tweet up, but I pulled this instead, which is better. Sami Obid, who actually I saw his show last month. Great. If he comes to your city, please go see him. He's half Palestinian, so I'll give him the right to say this. But he said, I am overwhelmed with joy from watching the people of Gaza smile and rejoice with the news of a ceasefire deal. That is all I want to feel today. We can talk the reality of it tomorrow. So I will give him that. I will give these children that. As I said earlier in a tweet, I am not going to deny any Palestinians who want to celebrate. They can and should. But I think for the rest of us, it's the idea of like, it's literally what it is, a brief respite. Brief. Because we're going to have hell to pay come soon. So I just believe we need to be a lot more measured in our response to this. Because again, I saw a lot of people say that Trump did what Biden couldn't. Biden was good in actually getting this done. Both of them are biggest shiniest shills in our government today. They didn't do shit. They only did what they needed to do to make themselves look good. At the end of the day, as we reported, and I think Svi said this best, it's just going to go back to pre-October 7th when no one was talking about Gaza except for maybe a few people online, and it wasn't mainstream. They're going to continue doing what they were doing, but they won't have the attention that they received up for the last year. So, and again, as I said, unless you're talking about full Palestinian liberation, and I said this to you, offline, unless there's talk about such like reparations for the Palestinian people, this is bullshit. It's just nothing more than a brief pause. And as you saw, like, I'm not going to take away the children's story. If they want to celebrate, let them. Or anyone who wants to celebrate, let them. But don't use the talking point of our government actually doing something. They didn't do shit, because it's going to go back to the status quo at some point. And I think this tweet sums up what we're saying the best. It's still free Palestine until Palestine is free.
Yep.
And I think, as I said, that's where we should end. So again, hopefully that made a lot of sense to you all. and I am speaking not necessarily to my ignorance, but speaking to, funny enough, like we've reported a lot on Israel, Gaza, this whole region for the past year. I still don't consider myself an expert in this. Like, there's a lot, even in just reporting, even just tonight, that we still don't know. So I felt like in talking with Reef and Indy over the last couple of days about this as I was pulling the story together, and thank you, Reef, for even pulling out the stuff that even today, you know, as I was working and trying to get things ready for the show tonight, this just proves, you know, especially like with news, that things change at a dime of a hat. And, you know, I want to be more concerned about, I think the concern is having the right take or having the right look in stories versus actually reporting the truth. And it's sad that I think even people in our space, some of the takes that they had, I think, kind of missed the mark in terms of what the reality is, especially for those who've been reporting on this that should know better, that did so in a way that kind of overstates what our government is doing and kind of understates the reality of what is going to happen regardless of who's in it. Yep. So I just say, moving forward, let's just take a measured and more nuanced response, and to, as I said on via tweet, proceed with caution. If you care to celebrate like a brief respite, fine, totally get that, but understand that this is more or less a gaslight in terms of what is going to continue happening regardless of who did what. Because Gaza is still in rubble. West Bank is still being occupied. Syria is basically taken over. And this country is shit.
Yeah.
And that's why, even just saying that, we are demonetized. So if you would like to support us and continue and to help us continue to report on stories like these, please scan the QR code if you have a smartphone that you see on your screen, or you can type in the link that you see at the bottom of your screen. Or if you're in our YouTube chat, you can type in ! the actual symbol, donate, all one word, and the link will pop up, and you can donate to our Ko-fi account. You can donate as little as $1, and that will, any amount helps in terms of pushing independent media. Actually, we should. Indy says, what does he say? Like, user-funded media, I think is the term that Indy uses.
Yeah.
Which I think, yeah, because not all independent media is truly independent, really, at this point. So
money, please.
But regardless, you know, obviously we know that times are tight for many people, and money is hard to come by for a lot of folks. So the free option that we hope all of you do regardless is like and subscribe, and please share our content to help fight the suppression that we see on YouTube, and to make sure you leave a comment. We definitely want to hear your thoughts on this quote unquote ceasefire, what you think of it. What do you think is actually going to happen moving forward? You know, do you consider this a win for either Biden or Trump? Let us know. We do read them, and your comments actually help us determine what we should talk about in future segments. Please help us get to free K. YouTube, I think, is openly trying to decrease our numbers. So, by the way, if you just check to see if you are subscribed to us, check to see if you still are, because I think YouTube is doing shenanigans on us. So, but regardless, we want to continue growing, and your feedback and your subscribing and you sharing our content helps us allegedly be pushed in the algorithm. And thanks for watching.
Yeah. All right. So before we get to that, we can check the chats for a bit. Over on the Rumble, Emoji put a little "the more you know" star. Someone's a child of the 90s/80s. You know, you remember the "more you know" segments? You know,
the what?
The
Yes,
more you
of course.
know.
Yes.
Yeah. I think Will Smith did one. I remember that one. Golden Monarch, ceasefire is likely a two-parter, a brief delay, resume with more funding somehow, some way. Yep. And with no hostages, they can level them. Without hostages, they will unalive all of them. Says Bad Cookies. Who also took the long trek over to YouTube to hit the like button, as you should. Listen to the cookies. So anything else you saw?
Not sure if Bad Cookies was mentioning this video or what will be clipped out specifically, but he said, keep this video handy. We will need it in 6 months to identify those corpses.
Yeah.
Vicky Adams, I guess she left, but she said thank you to us. You're welcome.
Yeah.
I think that's it.
Cool. All right. Cookies, the deal was bullshit to begin with. Isn't real is going to go back on their word. Yep. But anyway, you ready for our next one?
Yep.
So this is, and I have the name with me, Mahmoud Abbas. This guy right here. Part of the Palestinian Authority, right? You know, essentially president of that, one of. I'm sure I'm getting the details of that a little wonky, but I'm sure people will tell me. And then everyone knows this guy. That's Antony. Good old Antony Blinken. So I'm sure that meeting probably was super good for Palestine. But this is out of the Electronic Intifada, right? Tamara Nassar writing, talking about how the Palestinian Authority kills its own people and proves loyalty to Israel. So after the ceasefire deal, this is likely to be the, main suspect of who's in charge there. So, which we're going to get to. But they write, it has been over a month since the Palestinian Authority launched a deadly military operation in the Jenin refugee camp in the northern occupied West Bank. Okay? So far, at least 14 people, including 6 members of the PA forces, have been killed during the operation, which is purportedly targeting armed Palestinians in the camp with the aim of disarming them. But just like the Israeli assaults, on which it appears to be modeled, the violence and siege tactics indiscriminately harm local residents. Those killed among Palestinian residents of the camp include a father and his teenage son, as well as a female Palestinian journalist. Refugee camps in the northern occupied West Bank, including Ner Shams camp in Tulkarm, Al-Farah in Tubas, Balata in Nablus, and the Jenin refugee camp, have been the emergence of armed Palestinian groups to counter Israeli encroachment and land grabs and defend camp residents from Israeli attacks. Since Israel began its genocide of Palestinians in the Gaza Strip on the 7th of October, it has also carried out repeated raids on the refugee camps in the West Bank. The raids have included aerial bombardments, the destruction of roads and essential infrastructure like water and electricity, and the killing of both armed Palestinian fighters and civilians, including children. The deadly campaign in Jenin appears to be a bid by the Palestinian Authority to demonstrate its loyalty and effectiveness to its Israeli overlords, as well as the incoming U.S. administration under President-elect Donald Trump. The PA has, since its creation in the mid-1990s, maintained close cooperation with the Israeli occupation forces under the banner of security coordination. Baked into the Oslo Accords, under which the PA was created, is its obligation to fight Palestinian resistance, which Israel terms terror, on Israel's behalf. The PA's renewed demonstration of loyalty comes amid reports of its ambition to be involved in governing Gaza in a post-ceasefire scenario, right? So that's now, apparently. This apparently complete with similar Emirati ambitions. The United Arab Emirates discussed with the United States the possibility that it would participate in a provisional administration until a reformed PA is able to govern. Reuters reported last week, citing a dozen foreign diplomats and Western officials. So now that ceasefire is a thing, look out for that kind of stuff. The UAE will not participate in any plan that fails to include significant reform of the Palestinian Authority, its empowerment, and the establishment of a credible roadmap toward a Palestinian state, a UAE official told Reuters. The PA felt marginalized by Emirati ambitions, which appeared more aligned with Trump's wishes. This frustration prompted the PA to launch the large-scale, deadly raid in Jenin rather than a smaller operation in Tulkarm initially recommended by the U.S. According to the publication Middle East Eye, citing the unnamed officials, both current and former, from Egypt, the U.S., and Israel. For the PA, Emirati or American ambitions to be realized in Gaza, Israel would first need to achieve its declared military objectives, an outcome that remains far-fetched. Such plans don't always go as expected and may prove as short-lived as the ill-fated 230 million pier off Gaza's coast, which was built by the United States under discrete objectives before the project was abandoned and the pier partially drifted ashore in Ashdod, southern Israel. Israel's extremist right-wing politicians publicly undermined the PA despite its close collaboration with Israel, because controlled ops are needed. The military campaign in Jenin is a clear example of acting in Israel's behest, and Israel and the U.S. appear content with the PA's deadly performance. Israel has been surprised by the determination shown by the Palestinian security forces during the fighting, the Wall Street Journal reported, citing an unnamed Israeli security official. The PA is now requesting that the U.S. approve a 4-year, $680 million plan to train its forces and boost its ammunition and armored vehicles. Unnamed American and PA sources revealed to the publication Middle East Eye. All this weaponry is solely to be used against fellow Palestinians. PA officials requested in the meeting that their needs for armored vehicles and ammunition be met urgently in light of the difficulty of the clashes and their inability to resolve the situation in the Jenin camp. The request made in mid-December during a meeting with U.S. officials in the PA Ministry of Interior in Ramallah came with expressions of frustration from the Palestinian side over the U.S. failure to fill its commitments, including arming PA forces and approving funding for PA prisons in Nablus and Bethlehem. In the areas of occupied territory where the PA is nominal control, Palestinian forces are only allowed to arrest other Palestinians. They cannot touch Israeli soldiers or settlers who attack Palestinians. PA prisons anywhere in the West Bank are predominantly used for jailing Palestinians who dare to resist Israel's military occupation. This means in practice that the PA exists to protect Israel and its settlers and to police Palestinians on Israel's behalf. The PA's key role in suppressing Palestinian protest and resistance to Israel's military occupation is one reason why the U.S. and European states fund it. The PA's request for additional funding and arms made sense because the U.S. has been pressing the PA for months to ramp up security operations in the occupied West Bank. The publication reported, citing a former U.S. intelligence official. So these meetings tend to happen with, Palestinian Authority. I'm sure nothing can go wrong with meeting these people. Just this picture also I just had to bring because it explains so much. Like, anyway.
Sit down. Like, you look.
I know, dude. They look like fucking monsters. What are you doing? Like, anyway. Mirroring Israeli military tactics during the raids, PA forces sealed off the camp's entrances and stationed themselves inside homes and a hospital in the Jenin camp. Nearly 2,000 camp residents were forcibly displaced to nearby areas. 2,000 people just have to go somewhere else. The remaining Palestinians in the camp have been struggling to meet basic needs. The UN monitoring group OCHA reported grocery stores are running out of supplies and residents have had little access to water. Over 60% of the Jenin camp's population is affected by faulty water networks, which have been damaged by successive Israeli assaults, and the PA's assault has halted repair work. The UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees was forced to suspend its services in the camp for nearly 3 weeks. 4 UNRWA schools have been shuttered in the camp since the 9th of December, leaving 1,600 students out of school for weeks. For nearly 2 weeks, an UNRWA health center in the camp was temporarily occupied by armed Palestinians. The PA raid resulted in significant infrastructural damage, with nearly 30 homes burned and water tanks and generators damaged. UNRWA was also forced to suspend solid waste management, leading to accumulating waste. A young Palestinian journalist, 21-year-old Shatha Sabag, was killed after being shot in the head outside her home on the 28th of December. OCHA said it remains unclear whether she was shot by Palestinian forces or armed Palestinians. I'm betting we know which one. But the journalist's family was unambiguous in laying blame on the PA. So, Lawyers for Justice reports that journalist Jarrah Khalaf is being tortured in the Palestinian Authority's prisons due to his coverage of the ongoing PA crackdown on the Jenin refugee camp. So, these things like this are still happening. Palestinian Authority forces seized an anti-tank weapon during their raid and handed it over to the Israeli army, Israel's Channel 14 reported. We can congratulate the security authorities, said the Israeli journalist Hillel Bitan Rasen. Over the course of the raid, Palestinian Authority forces said they arrested nearly 250 individuals and defused around 250 improvised explosive devices, which are often planted by resistance groups along the roads. These devices have been more widely used by the armed resistance in the northern areas to resist Israeli invasions into the refugee camps and neighborhoods. During successive Israeli raids through the camps, bulldozers ravaged through the streets, destroying civil infrastructure, commercial stores, and residential areas. This damages water and sewage networks and impedes movement, including ambulances trying to reach the injured. Through this destruction of critical infrastructure is carried out under the guise of uprooting explosive devices from roads. Palestinians have interpreted these practices to be vengeful policies of collective punishment. Earlier this month, the PA ordered all operations by the Qatari broadcaster Al Jazeera in the occupied West Bank halted. After decisions by the PA's Culture, Interior, and Communications Ministry, several Al Jazeera websites were also shut down for 4 months. PA security personnel handed an official order to Al Jazeera staff before shutting the Ramallah office. The footage and the interaction was a repeat of the situation in September when Israeli soldiers on live broadcast arrived at the network's Ramallah office and handed the bureau head, Walid al-Amari, a notice to shut it down. So, closing thoughts, Care Bear? You know, I brought it just because, like, this is, with that ceasefire deal, we got these guys running things now, I'm betting. So, you know, incongruency with the UAE and
controlled opposition.
Generally, yes. So, not great, but yeah. So, anything else you want to add before we head out of here?
I mean, again, as much as I hate talking about Israel, I think this week was especially needed. But I think even though that each of these sections that we did tonight, they were different in terms of the topic in of itself, but it all led to. But there were similar themes in all of them, and how they connected together, and how ceasefire deal is connected to all of these things, which again, mainstream is definitely not going to talk about. Not even sure even some of our colleagues in independent media have talked about, and some have, but I don't think they see like how they all are connected, that the idea to assume that the ceasefire is actually a good thing, and I don't think they do, but I think the way that they kind of tweet at it is if our government is capable of doing good is seemingly is kind of in a lot of ways a disservice to our audience and their audience, that it's meaningful than it really is. And I think you and I know better, and I think often, but it's, yeah, as I said, it's just very sad that it almost seems like people have not learned anything. Or at least, but I think the idea is it's okay. Like, don't be so jaded that you can't find a joy in things. Like, even for me, as I did in the last segment, I had to bring in that clip of the Palestinian children celebrating. Like, I'm not a dick. Like, I'm not going to tell a child not to have joy. Like, I'm a fucking teacher. Like, my job is to create the conditions where joy can
continue,
abound. So ideally, so if children are having joy in something, as long as it's safe, they deserve to have it. But we have to kind of seep that in some reality of, have your joy when you can, especially right now. Like, these kids have not had joy ever.
No.
So to have experienced that even just for a moment, I'm not going to say, no, they can't do this, all of that. Like, no, have it. You deserve it. And tomorrow, we got to
get back to work.
And I think, I felt like I've been saying this a lot over the last few weeks. It's time to get to work. And for some of us, it might mean you need to figure out what the work is. And I think that's kind of where we are even right now in the space. I think people are trying to recalibrate and try to figure themselves out now in terms of this new administration and what that would entail. And I feel like I think this year, and I kind of said this, it's going to be interesting in terms of how people are going to respond and ultimately react, keyword react, to things which in the moment might not be wise. I think it's also something to be said of, and I'm cautious by nature when I probably shouldn't be as much, but I think it's a healthy thing at times to be cautious. You don't have to report on a story right away. Like, there is, I think, some decency in a way to kind of wait until like you get more information and then report on it based on the information that you get. But I think it's just the idea of like people wanting to react because it's the new thing and in the hope that people are going to talk about. Now, in this case, we kind of got lucky because normally we do the show midweek. We either get the tail end or like right at the beginning, like when things are popping off, and it's never usually a middle point. But it's okay to be nuanced. And in many ways, I almost prefer to be nuanced on where it's necessary. So, so I think even in this, we can not say celebrate, but understand why people are having joy right now, if not for a moment, and let them have it. But don't misconstrue that joy as an ongoing permanency. That is not. And it's a temporary respite, which I get. So know that, allow the people to have that. And tomorrow, and definitely heading into next week and the next few years,
Yeah.
Will be interesting. It'll be interesting to see how the topic of Gaza will probably not pop up, but like decrease. Like, or maybe increase because Trump is going to, so maybe people might care slightly more. But I would imagine, as Fee said, it probably will go back to pre-October 7th era, where even when I was coming into the space, it was like Gaza was something like, if you really were in the know.
Yeah,
you would
occasionally
know.
people would talk about it, right?
Right. And to have you talk about Gaza or Israel would be kind of like, what the fuck? Like, why you care? Like, that's kind of where I kind of came in the space at the time. So I can imagine more likely, or at least they'll try to return it to that. But I think the damage is done already. I think Israel has shown their ass. People are aware, and they won't be the same. It's just a question of now, how would our government, by way of respond now, which gives me fear, because we know, and we'll probably be as prepared as we can be, but the masses are not. And the implications of that, I'm very concerned about. But we'll learn, and we'll report on that, I'm sure, as time goes on.
Yep. And talking about those things are why we're demonetized. So you can scan that QR code on your screen, go to co-fi.com/indienewsnetwork, go down in that description and leave us a little donation, help keep the lights on. But, otherwise, just like and subscribe, hit the share button, let us know what you think. How bad is the PA gonna fuck shit up this time? But, otherwise, thanks for watching. Gabriel, we did it. We did it.
We did it.
Bit of chats here and there. So people were asking for this.
We're
Yeah.
Yep. Pretty much another week of.
We're fucked.
So yay. Luckily, at the end of the week, you could see boats smashing into other boats for eye bleach. But anyway, speaking of this week, what's coming up? Do we know? Indy's probably in the chat.
Needs to be updated.
Yeah.
No, he's not. But it's more or less the same. So tomorrow we have, actually, you can zoom in a little bit.
Yep.
It's a little hard to see. So tomorrow we'll have, at least during the work week, except Friday, we will have AM Wake simulcast, which
On
will be
Twitter.
on X only,
Yeah.
going on his Twitter, at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Tomorrow night we'll have Snow Himbo streams at 9. Friday we'll have Independent Review. That will be also on Twitter at 10. Angel in the Afternoon will be on at 6. Followed by now Indy did a stream with Golden Monarch. We found out yesterday the sound was
I think he's wanting to re-record that. So
I think he's probably looking to re-record and I think release it on Friday in the American Tradition Replay spot. So stay tuned, or you can check on our Twitter page at Get Indie News for updates on that. Saturday we'll have Pro Wrestling Talk
on Saturday. Pro Wrestling Talk on the Ocho.
So, by the way, if you're not there, please subscribe to our second channel. Speaking of that, Indy woke himself up.
He could remember to see that he took a nap in the chair again. Probably holding 3 kids at one time.
Right.
But pretty much everything was the same. So
same. So I got everything.
Boats on Sunday. How do we miss that on Sunday?
Right.
Back to back.
So Boats is on the Ocho, by the way. Monday, the X-Files with Yeti and Himbo.
Yep.
No American Tradition next Tuesday. Because
the Maple Files. Not to be confused with the Axe Files by David Axelrod. But anyway.
And we will be back next week.
Yep.
Hopefully, it won't be all Israel.
Same bat time, same bat channel.
Yeah, Angel at 7. So move that around a bit. But otherwise, I think that's our show, fam. So, you know, share this with all your friends, do all the stuff. You know how it goes. But otherwise, you know, labels are bad. Stay independent. Good night, fam.
Have a good week, everyone.
We want to talk right down to earth in a language that everybody here can easily understand.
Bye, have a great time.